Hello everybody, my name is Willa White, and as you know, September is recovery month, and we're here at the Axis in Ballymun, and Ballymun does recovery. I'm in recovery, I've no shame about saying that, and a lot of people in this area who have been in the same situation I have been have also chosen recovery. So if you or anyone else is in the contemplation stage, don't contemplate, make the move and come forward and get into recovery. So I'm joined here today. I've forgotten your second name. We're going to have to start again. That was a great start.
Keep going. Long.
I'm joined here today. Do you want me to start again? You sure? Yeah, I'm joined here today in the Ballymun Access Centre here in Ballymun with Timmy Long, one of the 2Norries, and it's kind of a reverse kind of thing happening here today because usually the lads, Timmy and James, would be on the other side of the microphone. So I have chosen today, or we have chosen, I suppose, would be more better of a word, for me to be the interviewee, the interviewer instead of the interviewee. So basically, I'm just going to have a chat with the two lads. I've started off with, as he told me earlier on, the best one. I'll take the 50 for that and put it to charity. I've started off with Timmy, so we're just going to jump straight into it. No big introduction. So, I mean, Timmy, if you can just tell me yourself, your name, where you're from, and a bit about yourself, we'll kick it off at there.
My name is Timmy Long. I'm from Hollyhill in Knocknaheeny. It's a section of Knocknaheeny in Cork City. I grew up in Arcullen, a part of Hollyhill, with my two younger brothers and my mother. You know, we grew up in a really close community, you know, where it was all about just being out in the street, playing with the other kids, playing soccer. Soccer was a massive thing for me growing up. You know, I loved it. But there was a darker side into the life as well, you know. There was an awful lot of mental health issues within inside the family home.
Right. And the area, just to kind of paint a little bit of a picture about it, would that have been the situation in some family homes in the area that you lived in? Was it classed, as I say, very, very loosely, like Ballymun, a working class area, or was it one of them areas that was actually rough around the edges and, you know, people kind of done what they had to do to survive? Some worked and some done whatever, you know?
Well, growing up in the 80s, I was born in 81 and we moved into Arcullen in 83. And there was a recession around that area. And nobody had nothing, you know. If you were working, you were lucky. And those that didn't work were getting hand-downs from the St. Vincent de Paul and other organisations. But in our household, there was nothing. There was nothing. There was a lot of nothing in many houses. There wasn't much. There wasn't much of the men working around the area, and if any man was working, like, you could see it because they had the extra. You could see it in the kids with the clothes. You could see it in the house with the paint. You know, there might even been a car outside the door. You know, no. Today, every house is 2 or 3 cars. Yeah. Back then, like, you might have an estate with 30, 40 houses with maybe 3 cars. That was just the way it was. Different times, you know, but it was a really, it wasn't an area for breeding criminals at that stage. It was just a kind of an area where kids were growing up and just trying to enjoy life, you know. But those things would kind of change later on when drugs became a part of the area, where you'd see lads wearing nice tracksuits or gold chains or nice cars, you know. That became a part of it, and that's when everything changed. Because you have to remember, a lot of us young lads back then, a lot of us wouldn't have been very well educated, you know, and our only means of maybe making a few quid was through criminality, selling drugs, robbing, all these different things, you know. So my earliest memories of the area was just fun, just kind of fun out in the street with the lads and whatever, you know. But there was some mad times then as well, outside of what was going on in the street, in the house. The house was a very, very, very sick environment for a child.
Right, so take me back to your introduction to drugs, or the first time you used any mind-altering chemical.
I was about 10, 11 years of age. I used to go around cutting grass with a lawnmower, be sniffing the petrol, buzzing the petrol for the day, going on the hop from primary school, robbing nail varnish out of shops, gas bottles, Tipex, going up into the laneways, the fields, because we were in the border of the city centre, and we would go up to the fields and just go on the hop from school and just sniff for the day, you know, and we were happy out. We hadn't a clue what we were doing, you know, but what it was doing, little bit known to us back then, was it was taking us out of our heads. It was taking us away from whatever shit what was going on in our lives at that stage. This substance or solvent or whatever was completely giving us that a bit of freedom for the few hours we were gone from the home environment, in my case.
And just the lads that you went up to the fields with, we'll just say, have any of them progressed to where you progressed, or did some of them just kind of stay at the, you know, the messing around kind of stage and just kind of leave her at that?
No. The way I see it is, even back then at the early stages, the people I would have been around were people that were in similar situations to myself.
Right.
Because we had that same kind of energy. And we were just looking for that escape. Most of the kids our age around us at that stage didn't have a fucking clue what solvents were or had any intention. They were just still caught up in their imagination, you know, where that was something that I kind of had to grow out of at a really young age because of my situations at home. But those lads today, a lot of them are still caught up in heroin,
right,
in prison. Some of them are dead. A lot of them would be dead.
Very, very similar to me. And your two brothers, were they younger brothers? The two lads.
Two of them. There's 3 years between the three of us.
Right.
So I'm the oldest.
And would they have been doing that kind of thing as well?
They did later on in life. You know, I don't really know what they were up to in their kind of teens and stuff like that. You know, they were good kids. They were good enough. You know, one of them would have been very friendly with James, the younger lad, and the guy in between the two of us. Then he was his own old happy old soul. Right. You know what I mean? But later on in life, the two of them became heavily addicted to heroin.
Right.
You know, and heroin destroyed them.
Right.
But.
And what about secondary school? What were you like in secondary school? What was that like for you?
Secondary school was very difficult because I learned nothing in primary school because I wasn't able to retain any information because my mind was consistently on what was going on at home, in the home environment and all these things. So going into secondary school and the step up where you're supposed to know certain things was very, very difficult for me. So I spent a lot of time not going to school and just messing about in different areas, and then start picking up. The drugs started getting a little bit harder, you know. I started smoking hash back then. There was no weed around at the time. Started smoking hash and drinking and still using solvents and stuff like that as well. But later on then I started finding ecstasy and prescribed medication. When they came along, then it just kind of escalated into
different
complete
level.
chaos. Like, you know, the robbing became big, joyriding, completely no fear, a lot of fighting, assaults, serious stuff, you know.
And trouble with the guards.
A lot of trouble with the guards, yeah. And this is at the age of 13, 14, 15, you know, until I eventually went into a treatment centre at the age of 15.
And what was that like?
Oh, sure, I thought it was a great thing to go into a treatment centre. A lot of young lads the same as myself. You know, it was a bit of a break as well from the environment that I came from, where it was chaotic. You know, there was a lot of it was getting serious at that stage. You know, I was starting to hurt people a lot at that stage by robbing from them, by fucking causing damage, you know, and you know, I would have been very violent as well when I had drink and drugs in my system. So things did kind of escalate fairly quickly when the drugs got a little bit harder, you know, particularly the drink, because when I had a drink, I would black out, and I often would end up on a street, on top of a black bag, inside of a ditch, inside in a cell, you know, wake up the morning full of blood, or inside in a cell, or inside in a car, or someone's, it didn't matter, just not knowing where you are, even in the garden of the house, just not knowing how you even got there, until you look at yourself and you're cut and you're destroyed. And
trying to put the pieces of the night together.
Yeah, there's some of them nights I still can't put together. You know, some of them nights are completely lost in history. I just can't. I don't even know what has happened. You know.
And did you take anything at all out of the treatment centre when you were 15, or were you just one of them typical 15-year-olds like myself that basically knew everything in life, and sure, what would they know? So when you left the treatment centre, what was, you know, did you do the whole course of the treatment centre, or did you get so far and go, you know, I'm getting out of here, or what happened then, Timmy?
Well, that treatment centre that I was in, the first one, something happened there that they closed down funds or something to that nature. And then from there, I went on to another treatment centre at the age of 16 to France for a few years. And I stayed in France for about 2 years until I was 18. Over there was a massive language barrier. I wasn't able to speak French or any of the other languages that were spoken there mainly. The main languages were Spanish, Italian and French. English was spoken by a few people, but there was no therapy. There was no one-to-ones with a counsellor or anything like that. It was just Timmy getting up in the morning, having some routine for his day, working on a farm, feeding animals. You know, I grew physically. I grew very, very, very much physically. I got bigger and stronger. But mentally and emotionally, I was as stemmed as I was as the 6-year-old child.
And was there no other English, you know?
There was a few lads from Dublin there.
Was there?
No, there was a few lads from Dublin.
There's another language that's very difficult
and
to learn
I'll tell you something that's very important as well. When I was over there, it was my first introduction to heroin as a drug.
Jeez.
I knew nothing about heroin. I came from Cork, and the only city back then in the 90s with heroin was Dublin. No, I mean, like, visually you could see it everywhere. In Cork, heroin was being used by certain groups, but it was kept very, very quiet. And I knew nothing about it. But when I went over there to this treatment centre and I seen the effects of heroin to people full on, I got a really bad fright. And that helped me later on in life. I see people coming from Spain, from Italy and other regions of France, and they're being drove into the centres by their families, and on the journey their families will be injecting heroin into their hands, like, to keep them settled in the car until they'd get to the centre. And I didn't know any of this until I was in the centre about 5 or 6 months, and they gave me some responsibility, you know. And this lady came in from Italy. Her family had drove them from Italy to where we were in France. And it really, really frightened me to see the condition of this person when she came into our care. Like, you know, I remember being told by the guy that was over the centre, him saying to me and another lad who'd been there longer than me, take her for a walk, you know. And at this stage she was coming down off the heroin. And I knew nothing about heroin, and she started offering me and him sex, you know, for us to go away and get her more heroin, because she hadn't a clue what was going on, you know. She hadn't a clue. And I was kind of saying, you know, I didn't understand what was going on. I was still young at the stage, you know, but that was just one of the things that frightened me about heroin. And as I said there a few minutes ago, that stood to me later on, because when heroin did come to Cork, I had that kind of view of the situations back in France, and I said, no, I can never go here. Like, if I go here, this is where it's going to bring me, you know. But little did I know it would still grip my family in a massive way, badly too, you know. As I said earlier, my two brothers, they became heroin addicts, you know.
Yeah. So when you eventually, I don't know whether you graduated from this treatment centre, or did anything like that happen, or was it just a set time where you got to say 24 months or whatever it was, and they just kind of said, you know, you go now? Was there a backup plan? Was there an aftercare program? Were they suggesting for you to utilise any 12-step programs that were available? Like, what was the, you know, what happened at the end when you actually left there, when you were thinking, right, that's me now, I'm done, I'm finished in France, and obviously you head back to Cork, I'm presuming?
Yeah, I stayed in one centre for about a year and a half, and that was more or less a centre. Like, I tried to run away from different centres in France as I was young, and I was a little bit wild, and I ran away a few times. And they put me to a centre in the middle of nowhere, just a farm, where there was this guy who was over the centre, but he was he had aggression, you know, and if he needed to bring it out, he would bring it out, and people feared it. And I see firsthand how it was used on people that used to fuck up, and that frightened me, you know. That frightened me, because this was a big man, a big, strong, muscular man, you know,
right,
and not afraid, you know. And so I kind of tamed down a little bit, and I ended up staying there for a year and a half, and I actually enjoyed it, you know, even though it was tough. But I asked to move on then after a year and a half, and I went to a different centre where it was more relaxed, and I stayed there for a while. There was no one watching me through the night, because we had kind of security in the grounds during the night to make sure everybody was still in their bed, that they didn't run away. There was none of that in the new place. And just all of a sudden I just decided, I've enough done here. There was no 12-step program.
right.
There was nothing. You know, it was just you're there. They might have a meeting every once in a while just to talk about how you're getting on. But like, it's still at this stage, I didn't understand the languages, and but it gave me a good bit of a breathing space away from Ireland, you know, and Cork at that young age. Because I suppose if I didn't go here, then I would have definitely went to prison and continued my drugs, and God knows what would have happened, you know. But when I did come home to Cork, there wasn't much of a program or anyone there to really give me any form of guidance, and the little bit of a guidance that I did get wasn't good for me. And within 6 months I was back using and drinking, you know.
Yeah, sure, that really in itself, I mean, that's inevitable to happen. And I don't know, because like me and like you, I always kind of found, and I don't know whether you did, but I found that I used to always blame the area that I lived for the problem that I had, and when that really wasn't the situation at all. Because no matter where you brought me, I still had the problem, like, you know, the geographics of it. And it's sad in a sense that you go to this treatment centre for this amount of time, and if the proper utilities had been there for you, you know, English speaking, as you talked about, and aftercare program, and an introduction to 12 steps, or something that you had the tools to go back to Cork with. I know the break is good and it's always good, but I mean, you're always doomed to get back into that cycle when you get back, because you're hanging around, you know, no better, you're hanging back around with the people you used to hang around with, and you're just put back in again. So it's only a matter of time, as you just talked about there, before you pick back up again.
You said something that's very interesting there, Willow. You spoke about the geographical. Like, a lot of people think by moving away from a certain area, putting themselves around a certain crowd, that it'll help them to get some form of release from addiction or whatever. That may be the case for some, but for my case, it wasn't, because I needed alcohol and drugs as well to survive.
Yeah.
at that stage of my life, because I'd so much stuff that I was stemmed in growth emotionally and mentally at a really young age, you know, and I couldn't deal with all those issues, you know, and I needed the alcohol and drugs to block all that stuff out.
Yeah.
And it did. And it did for many, many years. And it didn't matter if I went to Australia or America.
Yeah.
I was still bringing those feelings that are trapped in my body. And I was still bringing all the thoughts and experiences and all the influences with me in my head. You know, all these things were coming with me.
Yeah.
These
and
were packed in a suitcase as well as the bag that the clothes was coming on my back. You know, it was all there. It doesn't matter where you go. You know, things really started to change in my life later on in life, when I started dealing with the issues. You know, as you spoke there, was there anybody there to talk to, any program? You know, these are critical things in anybody's recovery. And recovery is not, some people get confused. My understanding of recovery is recovery from trauma. Alcohol and drugs is one side of it. They're the things that we used to keep us away from all the trauma. But the recovery for me is the recovery from all the stuff that I couldn't deal with, you know. And it's when I started talking about them and realising that a lot of my issues were normal, a lot of them weren't normal. And I started looking at the belief systems that I had within me, that you're no good, you're bad, you know, all the shame that I carried, the hereditary shame that was passed on to me, you know, from my mother and from my all these different people. And that's when I started to recover. You know, alcohol and drugs were stopped a long time ago. My recovery started then, because I was dealing with all these different issues, you know, and I was talking about them and I was trying to understand them, you know. I would be dyslexic as well, you know, and I don't really have a great memory, you know, but I do release different forms of energies trapped, kind of from trapped experiences of mad stuff that would have happened. And that's where my recovery is as well, like, you know. But I do understand, like, that a massive part of anybody's growth in life is dealing with the issues, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just touching on what you talked about there as well, and it would be very much so the same for myself, and I'm just speaking like you from personal experience, that the drugs and the drink was really just a symptom of my problem. Like, the drugs and the drink was just like a plaster to put on over the real problems that I was having in my life, like what you talked about. You talked about trauma, you talked about growing up in the area that you lived in, you know, and just not having the guidance. Even though I had a mother and father at home, I had no role model. My father was a raving alcoholic, a very violent man towards my mother and myself and my sister. And I just hadn't got that. And when I found that when I came into recovery like yourself, it was like I needed to go back and deal with the stuff that got me to the place I was before I actually came into recovery and start looking after myself, you know. So yeah, it is. It's crazy. So you're back home. You're from France. You come back from France. You're back to all that. You're back in Cork. What happens then? Does the crime start? The using start? You go to prison?
What happened then was I found a drug that I hadn't used before, which was cocaine.
Right.
You know, I started using cocaine on top of the alcohol because I was having some serious blackouts and a lot of charges were starting to stack up again. You know, a lot of public order shit, caught with knives and stuff like that. And I was looking for a solution. I didn't want to drink, stop, you know, but there was definitely a solution there. And that's when I found cocaine, you know. Cocaine just made me drink more, gave me the opportunity to drink more and not get drunk. And with that then I didn't have to end up inside in a cell or anything like that. And I just loved it. But there's another side of it too. It gave me self-esteem, it gave me confidence. You know, I wanted
Superman.
to be the centre of attention, something that I was never as growing up as a child, and I loved it. You know, I loved being the centre of attention because I was as time went on, I started building this little bit of a image for myself, you know, the muscles, the tattoos, you know, the jewellery, the cars, all these things, you know, that come with that lifestyle. And, you know, behind a whole lot of it, I was still a little boy.
Yeah.
A 6-year-old child.
Yeah.
7, you know, and just looking for a way out. But knowing that I was so deep at this stage that it was impossible for me to leave because I was vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know? And I went on like that with the use of cocaine for another 10, 12, 13 years. You know, I was home at 18. I was 6 months off everything. I was probably 19 before I went back and drinking drugs. And I went on till I was 31 years of age.
Jeez.
And it was completely chaotic. Like, when I drank and drugged, my life could have ended at any moment. I was so compulsive with my thinking that I could end up doing anything. You know, even being on holidays, attempted armed robberies on holidays and stuff like that with my family, like going missing for 4, 5, 6 days on holidays with my wife and the child. It was just completely calm. My drug use was really, really bad. I just could not stop, you know. But there were binges. When I did stop, it was because I was after picking up a serious charge, or I was out in the street and I had nowhere to go, you know, and I had to stop to get back into the house, you know, things like that. And then I'd go off it for a month, 2 months, 3 months, you know. Never, the longest ever was a 3-month period in between, you know. But during that period, all I thought about was my next session, how I was going to do it, what I was going to do it. And every time I went back out, it got worse. You know, my longest session binge was 10 to 11 months of a binge of 5 to 6 days a week. Jesus. Sleep for 2 days, you know, and I just went like that. I was involved in drugs as well at the time, and I had plenty of drugs to be taken.
Yeah.
And that's when I nearly died a few times. That's when I intentionally died through drug overdoses, you know.
Yeah.
I was taking quantities of drugs that I would have never took before, and with the intention of just dying, like, because at this stage I'd no one in my life. My wife was after, she wasn't my wife at the time, she was my partner, but she was after leaving me. You know, I was after sending her on because I wanted to use more drugs.
Yeah, of course.
I go away, leave, throw her out of the house.
Yeah.
You know, I told her to move back to her mother's, and I went away and I started using on a daily basis, staying up 5, 6, 7 days, you know, just constantly snorting cocaine, taking tablets to bring me back down, D10s, Purple Hearts, you know, up, back down, and drinking spirits then in between, whiskey and vodka in between, just to balance me out. All between like that, living a criminal life, you know, involved with all different forms of criminality. You know, we're dealing with all different levels of people that, dangerous people, let's just say that, you know, that my life could have ended at any moment if I crossed the wrong person, you know, and I could have been going into prison for a life sentence at any time as well. You know, it was just like that. I had absolutely no concern for my life or other people's lives. I didn't care. You know, I had no care, or I just really didn't care, basically. You know, and you probably can relate to that from your own experiences, you know.
It's part of the course when you're caught up and stuff like that, and I'm just listening to what you're talking about, and that is basically what it's like when you're caught up, whether you're taking drugs or whether you're taking drugs and selling drugs. And you talked about dangerous people. There's not a lot of nice people in drug dealing. Like, there's no soft people. Anyone that's selling drugs has, you know, a cache of weapons put off somewhere. They know dangerous people that can put you into the boot of a car, take you off, make you disappear. I mean, we all know someone who's been shot dead. We all know someone, you know, who's ended up in a really bad situation in a bad place because of taking drugs or dealing with people like these, like, you know. And there's no really fairy tale endings in anything like this. And I try to say that to kids, you know, especially on a primary school level, before they actually make that step into secondary school. Like, it doesn't end well. Like, it's always, I mean, you talked about it. family holidays. Like, I mean, could you imagine going off yourself if the shoe was on the other foot? And I'd have been guilty of doing what you were doing. I've done horrible things on my family that I'm really, really ashamed to say that I've done. But I've done them, you know. I mean, you can imagine going away with your missus and your missus going missing for 6 days. Like, I mean, you'd be going, what the you know, but that's what I've done, like.
Yeah, 100%. You know, if the shoe was on the other foot,
Yeah.
I don't think I would have stayed. And you know,
Well, there you go.
you know, I don't think I would have stayed. And I'd be very honest. You know, and sometimes I do look back, and when I do talk about things like this, I do actually feel a lot of compassion and empathy for my wife, and say, what the fuck does she see in me? But you know what? If she didn't stay, right, and I'll be very honest with you, I would be dead.
Right.
Because that wouldn't have gave me anything to live for, to fight for. Because I didn't really care for myself. I was never going to do this for myself, you know. And that life carried on for 10, 12, 13 years, and then it just kind of hit a standstill.
Right.
You know, it just, I don't know if I told you before, but it was like I had this little bit of a spiritual awakening. I can't put the words together of what actually happened. It was just my first glimpse of awareness, something that I'd never experienced before. Arrested again for another violent robbery, inside in a cell, looking for drugs that I'd planted on my body inside in the cell, couldn't find them, started crawling around the floor inside in the cell, trying to pick up pieces of white paint off the floor, thinking that they were clumps of coke. And then it was just like this voice came into my head saying, what are you doing? Like, is this your life? Is St. Stephen's is there? Bar an order on the house. You're going to prison. You're open bail for another serious charge. You know, nowhere to live. The guards are looking at you because you're after breaking the curfew. And now you're inside in a cell, and here you are crawling around the floor naked, covered in pepper spray, and you're trying to get pieces of coke. And that was it. I jumped into the bed. That was it. I jumped back into the bed, the slab.
Yeah.
And I cried.
So you were having
this big hard man had a big cry.
Yeah, you were having a typical drug addict's day, basically.
Typical, yeah.
Yeah.
Covered in pepper spray. And I had a big fucking scuffle with the guards as well. And I was sweating. And the pepper spray now was going into the pores of the blood now, you could see little I was destroyed. And I just lied there and I felt sorry for myself. And I cried for the whole night. And that was the last time I drank or drugged or gambled or lived that life of crime. It wasn't that easy, but it was the start.
Yeah.
That was it. That's when I went looking for help. A day or two later when I was able, they left me out 2 days later, right? I thought I was going straight to the jail and remand, you know. I got out of the barracks and went up to my wife and I asked her to leave me in. I told her I was sorry. You know, I wasn't even living with her this time, but I couldn't go to the other house because I thought the guards would be looking for me. And I went in and she paid for the taxi at the door. And she left me in, she left me sleep in the couch. And the next morning, I went to the doctor. I asked the doctor for help. And the doctor put me on antidepressants and he gave me a phone number to ring, and I phoned this place called Heron House in Cork, and I met a counsellor, and I got on a list for pre-treatment for a treatment centre. I was really struggling, my mental health was gone. You know, I was after really snapping at this stage, you know. And I started speaking with this counsellor for a while, the pre-treatment. So I had these two things now that were helping me, counsellor, pre-treatment, and then 6 weeks later after this, it was the 26th of December 2011, this happened in the cell. The end of January I went into treatment centre. I stayed in treatment for 1 month. I got out of treatment at the end of February and I got locked up on the 12th of March because the guards, I was brought in. No, they didn't even go looking for me in the treatment centre. They knew that I was in the treatment centre and they left me there. I got out, they came up to the house. I says, listen, I'll hand myself in. And they says, lad, just turn up on the 12th. And I turned up on the 12th. and I got 7 year for a 7 year and 2 suspended for a violent robbery and assault.
Right.
You know, something that to this day I can't even remember. I'd been out the night before using cocaine.
Yeah.
And I knew I had to be home the next day for something that was important for the child. I think it was the child needed first day of school or something to that nature. It was important anyway, because I would never go home.
Right.
You know, so it was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I said, how am I going to get down off coke? I had a load of tablets, prescribed meds in me at the time, and I had half a bottle of vodka, so I started drinking the vodka with the tablets, and I woke up the next morning in white overalls inside in the cell. This is a different time, like. And I didn't even know. They were asking me, did I even know I was there for? And I said, no. I knew I was with my brother the night before, and we were very violent around each other. Well, I was violent, and I actually thought that I was after murdering him or committing a serious crime, because violence was a massive thing with us when we were in contact together, and when I was on drugs, you know, because of it was just our second nature because that's all we seen growing up, you know, but that was it really, you know. Went into prison.
So how was, you talked about getting that 7 year sentence and 2 suspended, so you've got 5 years in prison. You're going into prison, you're clean. You remain clean for the 5 years in prison.
Yeah.
That in itself, from someone that's been to prison, is like giving an alcoholic a job in a brewery and not having him drinking. Because you know and I know what prison is, what prison involves, what goes on in prison. So how did you manage to do that for 5 years, and like who did you hang around with, and what was it like doing that sentence, like? And where was the prison you were in?
I started in Cork, and I was there for a week, but I was locked up with my 2 brothers as well in Cork. We were all in prison. The 3 of us were in Cork. My co-accused was my brother as well.
Right.
And we had another brother that was in separate charges.
Right.
So I was sent on to the Midlands. Tommy was sent on to Portlaoise, and they kept their younger brother in Cork. So I was in the Midlands doing my thing, you know. I was still in recovery. You know, every day on the phone I would pray that Nicole would tell me that she's had enough and she's leaving me, so it would give me an excuse to go back using.
Right.
You know? But it didn't, you know, and I just kept pushing for the services in the prison. It took me a while to see the psychologist in the prison. I'm still on antidepressants now in the prison. It took me a while to see the drug counsellor in the prison, but when I did get to see him, I had a bit of a structure then. So I was seeing both of these on a weekly basis. I was going to the school every morning, you know, every day. I re-educated myself in school. I done my junior cert and then all these things, you know, and I kept myself busy. I done every personal development group they had inside the jail. You know, I just kept looking for the next thing that was positive to keep me busy and out of my own head.
Yeah.
I was really, really struggling, you know. And then after about 9 months inside in the prison, it was about 10 months in recovery. No, I was actually nearly 12 months in recovery. On the 3rd of December 2012, I got a knock at the door off the priest, and he told me that my mother was after committing suicide in the family home. You know, I was about 9 months into the sentence at this stage. And me and my brother, we were all locked up in different prisons in the country, and I was distraught. You know, I had no connection with her at this stage because I was going through an awful lot of trauma from my childhood, and it was very difficult for me to have any form of contact with my mother because a lot of it was, all of it was because of her. Right. You know.
How old was your mum?
She was 50. She was 53. She was 53. She died the day after her birthday. She was 50. She was 53. I was 52 on the 2nd of December, and she hung herself on the it was either her birthday that night at 8 o'clock or it was the next day, you know. But I had been on the phone earlier on in that night just to wish, because my brother Tommy was after coming over from Portlaoise that week for a visit for a week. And he was on the phone to her inside in the office, you know, the class officers.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
And I went in and I wished her a happy birthday and I said hello, and because I was writing letters to her and we were talking. She said she was getting a bit of help from a counsellor, and that made me very happy, because in my head I was hoping that I could have some form of a relationship with her or something, but that happened then, and sure, like, we weren't left out for the funeral or anything like that. We were kept in.
Hell.
It was tough. But
did they even bring us to the hospital or
escorted us down to the funeral home to see her before they closed the casket.
Right, okay.
And they brought us back up. You know, I was happy I was just happy to see her.
I think that in itself of just being brought down and, you know, kind of putting a little bit of closure, even though it's not an awful lot, and being able to say our last goodbyes and see her for the last time. I just can't even fathom, or I can't even imagine what that would be like, getting that knock on the door, you know.
I was just always expecting it, if I'd be very honest.
Were you?
Growing up, it was always, she would have attempted suicide. My mother was a very, very tormented woman.
Right, so she suffered with her mental health.
She suffered really, really badly, you know.
Yeah.
She had a breakdown when I was 3 years of age. And
right.
And she wasn't well even before that. Even, you know, talking to family members and stuff like that, she would have been always, there was always something there, you know. She was a pity, you know, like she was a pity.
Jesus, say she was alive now, Timmy, she'd be really fucking proud of you, man.
She would be very proud, because, like, there's 2 of us now in recovery. 3 of us were in recovery up to last year. One of my younger brother, John Paul,
he fell out of the boat, did he?
He slipped. Hopefully he'll find his way back in.
He will.
You know, but you know how it is, Willow.
Yeah.
You know, with family, like, there's not much you can do for any addict if they're an active addiction. We spoke about this earlier, about something else, and if someone's in active addiction, like, it's not that their family or friends don't love them. It's just very, very hard thing for a family member to be around a loved one while they're actively killing themselves with drugs, you know, and we're watching this, and it's destroying me and my other brother and the family and the relationships. It has destroyed us. Like, there's so much that have to happen in the last 12 months since this. But we've learned just to try to live with it, and when he is ready, we'll pick him up.
Yeah, well, it's like, you know what, it's like the addict is in the sea beside you and you're in a life raft and you've thrown out the life jacket and the boat is there, and they just keep swimming by and pushing the life jacket out of the way and swimming further from the boat. Yeah. When the time is right and you're tired enough from the swimming and you feel like you're drowning, you'll swim back towards the boat or you'll put the life jacket on. You know?
We both know, like, a lot of people, family members ask me, like, what can they do? How do we help them? You know? We both know what there's nothing anybody can do. Yeah. You just have to leave them off.
Let it run its course.
Leave them hit their bottom. And we both know also some people's bottom is a bottom that they don't get up from. Yeah. You know, and that's the reality of it. Yeah. But it's you can't say that to a family member that's struggling in their own lives because they're watching a loved one die in front of them. And the last thing they want to hear is you telling them, like, oh, sure, they might die, you know. But the reality of it is, it is that, and it's sad, and not everybody makes it. We both and James, and we've all lost friends and family members to addiction, and it's not nice when it happens. But it's like somebody said it there years ago. It has happened so much within our communities that when somebody does die from a heroin overdose or a suicide, it's like it's an initial shock, but you're after learning just to get on with it. You move on, you know. True. It's so often that we hear of people we grew up with dying from suicide or drug overdoses or whatever, that we just kind of we have to get on with it. We grieve for them. We go to funerals, but we also know, like, we can't dwell in it, we have to move on, you know.
So tell me then, you get out on the prison sentence. So take me from the prison sentence, getting out and getting to where you are today in your present time in life. What has that been like, and what has that involved or entailed?
When I got out, I kept going with the education stuff that I started in prison. I done a FETAC level 4 and a FETAC level 5, and that gave me enough to go on and start third level education. But in between that as well, the FETAC 5 and 6, I went back and I passed my qualification as a carpenter joiner, something that
Brilliant.
I couldn't complete when I was younger because I wasn't academically able and I'd failed the exams. But now I done them and I passed them, which was a massive achievement for me. And the people in DTB, James would know him, James would work with these people, and they were fantastic, helping me to get back on the courses and get me set up, and talking to the lecturers on the courses and just tell them, like, help this lad out a little bit more. And you know, and they did, and they were very, very good for me, and I'm very grateful for that.
Of course.
So that was all part of it. Went into third level education. During all these periods, I was going to plenty of meetings. I was still going to a psychotherapist on the outside. I was a psychologist in the prison, but I was a psychotherapist on the outside. I was going to see them every single week without failure. You know, I was meditating on a daily basis. I was going to meetings. You know, I kept doing everything that was asked of me to keep recovering.
So you had a great recovery structure. You had everything. You had everything that you hadn't got in France.
Yeah.
And this time now it was working for you.
It was, but I also had my struggles in between, you know.
Of course.
I had more responsibilities than I would have had before.
Yeah.
I had 2 young kids now at this stage, and I had a family home, and I had a partner to provide for. And there was times where it all came crumbling down.
Yeah.
And I actually thought about suicide a lot in recovery, you know, because it was a lot for me to take on, a lot for me to take on board, you know, all these responsibilities, you know, and I didn't know how to deal with it most of the time.
Yeah.
But I had this persistent drive, this fire within me that just kept pushing me along. The next every hurdle that I'd hit, I just kept getting over it. And I wasn't jumping over them. I was lifting myself over them. And sometimes I'd fall when I get over them, but I get back up and I keep going on that road, you know. And I kept getting stronger. For every dark place I was in, when I came out of that, I was stronger as a person, you know. And I kept growing because I had an awful lot to deal with. And my life just kept getting better and better, you know. The education stuff, I found out I was dyslexic in third level education. They done an assessment with a psychologist, and all these things kind of helped me to grow as well. So I went from believing that I was thick to no understanding that I had an intellectual disability, and I was never thick. It was just I had difficulty in learning, and they helped me to kind of move on to the next level. And it was just, I just kept doing the next right thing. And it's the behaviours are a massive thing as well. All these behaviours from the whole life, the robbing, not care what people think and all this. I had to watch all these things as well and stop all that, you know. And I had a massive ego, the big bravo macho man. I had to tone all this stuff down, you know. I had to change my demeanour around people. I didn't have to be this big aggressive man anymore. You know, and that's when my life started to change, and that's when people started coming in, and I started getting this belief that people were good, that human people, everybody, because I lost that as a young child because of my circumstances. I believed people were bad because my main caregiver was hurting me in certain ways, you know, and I believed everybody was bad because I didn't trust anybody, you know. And all that started to change because there was good people in my life and they were helping me. And I was always wondering, what the fuck do they want now of me?
Yeah.
But they never wanted nothing.
I know,
And to this day, they still don't want nothing. And it's great. And then one day I just said, you know what, I'm going to start trying to trust people unconditionally.
Yeah.
You know? And my life started to change. And then I started to get this certain kind of love for myself something that I'd never experienced before. And then I started to love others, my wife and my kids. And my life has changed, and it's just, and I'm still on a mad journey. Like, I could have a bad day any day.
Yeah.
But I have tools today to be able to deal with them within me.
Yes.
Within me. And I understand that you don't have to fight everything. You don't have to fight everyone. You don't have to fight every thought that comes into your head. Sometimes you can just say, it is what it is, and just surrender into it and move on to the next thing, and just feel whatever bit of pain you're going through within your body, whatever thoughts are going through your head. My boss might be saying you're bad or whatever.
Yeah.
And go with it, because the next day will be probably something 100% different. No 2 days are the same, I believe that, because of my own experience. And, I'm still growing today. I still do my meditation on a daily basis. I've started my own company, as a construction company. Myself and James, we have the podcast.
Brilliant.
Everything. I do a lot of good things, and it's like karma. If you read up on karma, like, if you're doing bad things will happen.
Yeah, vice versa.
Because in my whole life, all I was doing was creating bad experiences for myself and everyone around me. And they were just kept tumbling and tumbling. But no, we're creating good stuff. We're doing positive stuff, and life is good, and a lot of change in it.
Yeah.
A lot of change in my life at the moment, and it's tough to deal with. It's tough to deal with, but it's positive. And I'm starting my life at the age of 40. Where some people started when they come out of college. But I'm enjoying myself. I'm leaving life happen in its terms, let's say. Leaving it happen without me trying to be the puppeteer and move it like I wanted to move it. And just trying to, right, if it doesn't go my way, let's see how it pans out. And
so far, so good. It's crazy because I'm a firm believer, like yourself, when you give back, you get back. Like what you talked about, do good, feel good, do bad, feel bad. And you talked about responsibilities when you got clean first, And a fella said to me once at a meeting, he says, responsibilities is the ability to be able to respond, which made it very, very clear for me. Because I remember when I used, my only responsibility every day when I got up was to get drugs and use drugs. So now with a complete different set of responsibilities. I had the responsibility of 2 children, a partner, like what you talked about yourself, a mortgage or rent or whatever it might be, tax on the car, all these things that I'd never done before. And some days in the sickness of my brain, I used to say, geez, it was a lot easier getting a bag of gear for 20 quid and sitting down, fuck this shit, it's not all it's played out to be.
Yeah.
But you know what, it's like that thing, isn't it? Be careful what you ask for, because you just might get it, like. And when you look at your life now, I mean, I'm blown away by your story, and I mean, likewise, when I talk to you, as you were in the same position about me, but we're very, very resilient. We can change, we can make a difference, not only to our own lives, but we can make a difference to other people's lives. And I mean, your story has made a big difference to my life, and I'm sure anybody that's watching this, listening to this, whether it's in the contemplating stages of trying to get clean, or doesn't even want to get clean, but listens to this and goes, Jesus Christ, well, if he can do it. It's like that thing with the program. When I go to meetings, it's attraction rather than promotion. Like me and you are here, like what you talked about. We're looking for nothing for this. If this helped one person along the line, we'd be very, very happy. And I know you would be in anyway. So I'll tell you what I'll do. Before we wrap it up, if you could give any advice to anybody that's either using or is in the contemplation stages of going into recovery, going into treatment, or contemplating coming off drugs, what would you finish up by saying to them?
That they're not on their own, firstly, and they're not the only person that thinks the way they do. There's plenty. Like, the one thing I always believed before I went into AA or any other form of meeting of recovery was that I was the only person that felt the way I did, and acted the way I did. But when I walked in the door of an AA meeting and I listened to other people's stories, and they started talking about my story, you know. I knew then I was on my own, you know, and there's no shame about asking for help.
Yeah.
You know, there's no shame in asking for a lift to a meeting or to talk to someone over a cup of coffee because they had a relapse. You know, there's no shame in it.
Yeah.
You know, you pick yourself back up, you get back in the game.
Yeah.
You know, and just don't be fucking giving yourself a hard time as well. You know what I mean? I know we all have our own kind of difficulties in life because of certain of experiences, but like recovery and being away from alcohol and drugs will be the best decision. And I may say a decision now because we need something to happen before we can make that decision to want to give up drinking drugs. Will be the best decision that you'll ever make in your life. Because we think it's one-sided. When we come from certain areas and all we see is drinking drugs around us all our lives, we believe that that's it. It's not that. It doesn't have to be like that. There's a way out. There is a way out. And take the first step into your local AA meeting or into your community centre and ask for the drugs worker, you know, or ask someone close to you that you know is in recovery from alcohol or drugs or whatever. Ask them to take into a meeting. Ask them for a half an hour of their time for a cup of tea. And just make that first move. I know there's a lot of fear around it, but it'll be the best decision that you'll make. It might be a decision that you don't want to make, but do it. Do it. Feel that fear and do it anyway. That's a book that I was supposed to read once upon a time, but I didn't. But the title was enough for me. Feel the fear and do it anyway. You know, and that's what I would advise anybody to do. You know, just ask for help. Ask anybody. Ask someone they trust. You know, just get away from your circles. It's not an easy decision to make when you're around people that are only doing one thing, you know. But if you want to live for yourself or your kids or a loved one around you that you care for, make the move, open your mouth, pick up the phone, knock at the door and just ask for help, and that would be probably, or go to a doctor and they'll, a good doctor that will put you in the right direction, you know. And that would be it really, you know. I would not kind of that's it really.
Timmy Long, it has been a pleasure and it has been a privilege.
Thank you.
To talk to you, and I genuinely and sincerely wish you the best on this recovery journey, and I know we're going to remain in touch and we're going to remain friends. And if I'm down in Cork, the real capital, or if you're up in Dublin, the real capital, I'm sure we'll meet up and have a coffee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Willa. Cheers.